Hello and welcome, humans and future sentient silicon beings, to the Fourth Age with Noah and Marty. Today we have guest William Smith with us. William, you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely, guys. Thank you for having me on the channel. I'm William Smith. I'm a former director of strategy at Microsoft, and I am helping small and mid-sized companies with their digital transformation journey. Sometimes it's hard to get help. So what I do is I provide my expertise to help them in their specific destination and application needs. Doubling down, I do also do mentorship for startups as well as inner city kids. I'm a part of generous organizations and philanthropies, and yeah, just out there to help people do stuff.
That's awesome. One of the topics that we have not explored that we're excited to explore is, I guess, the how nonprofits and charity organizations will be affected by AI. And one area we have explored, of course, is this whole AI revolution is acting like a revolution. People are losing jobs rapidly, and more jobs to be lost, and more changes to how society works, and that's necessarily going to make a lot of despair, a lot of people struggling. And the funny thing I'm trying to understand better is AI is going to make jobs go away, but AI might also be able to help charities help people. So just like with the Industrial Revolution, I think people lost a lot of jobs, but there were new jobs and new realities to catch them. And so I was just curious, since you've done a lot of work in charity and nonprofits, if you've already seen what kind of effects you're even just seeing from AI now.
Yeah, I mean, everyone has general access to, of course, the large language models and really just
Hmm.
getting their hands on the first concepts of AI. Usually, non-for-profits, fintech firms, and different sectors of business are kind of slow to the punch when it comes to emerging technologies. Um, as far as day-to-day productivity basis things, yeah, a lot of non-for-profits are utilizing that to do email campaigns, grant writing,
Yes,
um,
I've seen that too. Grant
just
writing.
yeah, I mean, it helps a lot because if you think about it, writing all of those grants, summarizing them, it's a lot of work, especially for one person who's probably not, they don't have their major in like an English major
Yeah.
and also a business and government major. They're probably they just want to help people.
Yeah.
So the bureaucracies of how to translate that, they would have to um, contract on someone else to do that work. Now, with the right mindset and direction, they can spruce up a grant document in a matter of less than a day.
One of the companies I'm advising did just that. One of the guys on the team was like, "Oh, I'll just try it for this non-dilutive funding," and it
Yeah.
was really, really good. I mean, he had to then go in and make it relevant and edit it a bit, but it provided a really good framework and took a lot of work off his plate, so he could get back to actually helping make a medical device rather than talking about the medical device he may one day make.
E- Exactly. And it also helps with, other things like customer service, um, productivity as far as organization of sponsors
Mhm.
and capturing events and capturing information. So yeah, I mean, overall, it's a slow grind, it's a slow increase, but it's nothing transformative right now.
Okay. Are you seeing more need for the work these organizations are doing?
Oh, absolutely. When it comes to just overall just outreach, like there needs to be a huge gain in outreach because, for someone to contract someone to do the outreach, it's another salary. For someone to do the grant writing, another salary. For someone to actually help the kids, multiple salaries because it doesn't take one person to do it, it takes multiple people. So if you could offset some of these challenges in an automative way, it would help, the organization to be more flexible, scalable, especially during a time where markets aren't giving enough money out.
Yeah.
Government is cutting back on funding, student loans, different things. Like it's challenging. So during those challenges, having software and automated products or automated solutions and products that'll help you kind of get your job done, it makes it a lot easier.
Are you seeing more people losing their job to AI and then needing the organizations that you're working with, or is that not yet?
Yeah, not right now. I mean, if you losing your job right now, it's not because of AI. You probably did something wrong,
Okay,
to be
okay,
honest with
okay.
you. Because it's it's a scary thing at the end of the day, and right now there's like customer service agents. I think that was one that was a concern because uh, instead of them just answering the phone, you could be a robocaller. It's not perfected. It still sounds similar to a robot,
Yeah.
but eventually it will get better and it may displace some jobs, but it can't totally displace everyone's job, at least in the next 10 years.
The Open AI voiceover thing, I just tried it. I guess I don't know if I'm in a beta or whatever, but it was pretty good. The voice sounded
Yeah.
kind of like an over enthusiastic friend, but the intonations were there and the flow was good. Have you tried it?
I haven't tried that one. I've tried another one, and iOS has one where you can like you dictate however you want. Like if I were to type in a message, it'll talk if it was me.
Oh, okay. And is it
Um,
pretty good? I don't know if I've tried that one. It'll talk as you.
it's a little wonky.
It'll
Yeah,
okay,
yeah. So I did like a little. I had to do like voice. I forgot what they call it.
yeah,
Scripts, I guess.
okay.
And with these scripts, you just read different scenarios and stuff. And when you go in to write a specific message, it'll sound like you.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, and those are the jobs I wonder about. Maybe not getting lost because the jobs may get lost even if the perception of the quality is good enough. And that's what if
Exactly.
you're under the gun as a boss and you're running a data center and you need to cut by 10% and the AI says, hey, some company says, hey, I can provide it. Even if they stink, they still may get the bid.
Exactly. Crazy.
I've seen a presentation by a person who claimed to be a digital avatar, and it was pretty clean.
Yeah.
Um, the There may have been artifacts, but the presentation quality was kind of like Zoom, conversation type quality. So it they weren't presenting in the kind of HD that would allow, and I wasn't doing forensics on the outcome, but the video presentation looked more or less like a human being addressing a laptop and claimed to be a digital avatar of that person themselves.
Do you have man, we may need a reference to that one. That sounds kind of cool.
Yeah, I could dig that out. I also I've been talking to a a podcast show in Australia, and they've had a couple of their things actually written. They intersperse interviews with little like 5 to 7 minute ones, and they've had ChatGPT write them some of those uh, brief pieces. So
Nice.
that's another area of sort of content generation. Um, One concern I'd have, and granted, early days, so right now there'd be a lot of advantage available to people in the charity space to be able to up their grant writing abilities, but I'd expect to see reactions in the bureaucratic space unless large scale reforms were instituted uh, to perhaps replace the entire grant structure with some sort of other sorts of mediative, you know, barriers. But since the entire purpose of the grant system is to sort of ward against scammers and other presumably unworthy folks from getting the cash, and if it becomes easier or even trivial to produce plausible and copious attestations of your well-doing, we could see a quick rise in the number of scam artists that are involved, followed by a quick rise in the amount
Mm.
of material that needs to be produced to get things back to
Oh, great.
having to be an incredibly long-term onerous
I've
process.
got a solution.
Uh,
Hmm.
Let the grant readers need to use AI. There, I've solved it.
well, precisely, yes. Um,
Uh,
and that might be how we get good AI with a conflict. So we have grant writer AIs and grant reader AIs with different interests,
yeah,
um,
that's an interesting point. That
improving their ability.
that it's not like there's more grant money too. That part's not changing. At least not as far as I know. We're just in theory making it more efficient, which yeah could make it worse. William, you also mentioned something I wanted to dovetail a little into, which was democratization of this. And one thing I was looking up, we did a talk on Noah and I did a talk on this last April, I think it was, and one of the points we hit up was that, and I just found a data point for this, that 97% of Americans own a cell phone, 85% of Americans own a smartphone. And so, and then ChatGPT is free for the lower tier. But that's really interesting because to me, that puts a really powerful. I tell people treat ChatGPT like an assistant who knows all of relativity and poetry and everything else, and they can assist you with figuring out your ideas. And now it's in their pocket if they are part of that 85%, which is missing that last critical 15%. I don't know exactly who's in it. I know Noah's in it, sort of, but I'm sure there's a lot of people who could use it who are not in there. But that democratization seems really interesting to me. They could at least go to the library and use this. But I think there's also a knowledge of it. I know I'm struggling to even learn how to use ChatGPT in my daily life. I'm wondering if there's an education that needs to happen, an outreach on how to help people use this and bring themselves out of whatever problems they're experiencing.
Yeah, I think eventually they'll have certifications in their platform. Essentially, no different than like an Amazon. You know, Amazon has and Google and Microsoft. They all have specialization certifications in their platforms, whether it be their cloud platform, Google it be their ad and platform. But essentially, and my Alexa just went off while I said, I don't know why I just said
It
that.
wants your attention.
But right. But yeah, essentially, I think OpenAI will eventually have that. I think the reason why they're not doing it
I
now is
think
because,
they
oh, go ahead.
might actually have it already.
Okay.
This again is a self-claim, but I was the people I mentioned in Australia that they're also giving these sort of monthly conference calls, and the guest speaker at the last one that I was at claimed to have a prompt engineer company that had gotten an I believe he said OpenAI
Hmm.
certification as effectively prompt engineers.
Wow.
Um,
Huh.
and so
Interesting.
that might be a thing that is in its infancy already.
Okay. Well, there you go.
And in particular, his basic pitch was that the more you give the AI to chew on, the better the outcome is. So it isn't write me a grant for a new Big Brother Big Sister program. It's here's a sample of 30 grants that were successful for Big Brother Big Sister programs. Write me a successful grant to operate in this neighborhood with these demographics and this list of children,
Hmm.
and here are their backgrounds, and then it will do a fantastic job of taking that basic form and putting it in, but you're still doing a lot of that work, and so it's not so much write me a new movie script. It's this is exactly what movie scripts look like. This is the plot of the
Yep.
movie that I want. Here are the characters and the character lists. Here's the four major scenes, and this is what the scenery descriptions look like. Blender, repeat, or
Yeah.
whatever.
And then go on strike.
Tools to be successful. Hmm.
Right? Yes.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah. The grant readers are about to have a whole world of hurt. I think they're going to have to be doing in-person meet or Zoom meetings and stuff to verify you're a human and to make sure you understood the subject or something, which may put us
Yeah.
right back to the problem of is AI helping in this department? I wonder, one of the things
Well,
I've heard that people have been using AI for is to even help them express what they're trying to express. So maybe in that vein, it might be really good. I know with coders, learning a new area of code has been really helpful for AI. Like if you're learning how to write with React, which is a web development platform, uh,
It
it'll sit
gives
there and
people
explain it.
help.
Yeah,
Yeah, it gives people a little bit of ammunition when it comes to getting what they need done, especially with like grant writers. Like most of the grant writers or most of the people who work in non for profits, they're may have a college degree, but they're more focused on community outreach, not academic success.
yeah,
Like the moral is to get the stuff done. How do I get the stuff done? I don't know much into it. For them to learn how to grant write, it may take 6 months, but they give them six months of information in 6 minutes.
yeah. So maybe helping them learn to write a grant faster.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly. And effectively.
right. You said right now, if you don't have a job, something else is going on, and I think that's probably because the job market is generally good. But if AI keeps going in this direction, in theory, there's a lot of jobs that are going to drop soon or start to drop. And I guess what I'm wondering is, what do you think is going to happen with uh, charity organizations in general? Is it because I expect a sudden, it could be a sudden wave of people. These things tend to happen pretty fast. It seems like, or at least faster. By
Hmm.
the time you realize it's a problem, it's too late. And so I'm wondering if it's at some point here there's going to be a sudden explosion in need for these groups, and what that might look like.
Hmm. So help me phrase the answer. So the question is, how will jobs be displaced in the next few years? Or I'm sorry.
So I think it's almost certain that jobs will be displaced as we start to figure out how to replace them. So voiceover work we were talking about, writers,
Yeah,
um, programmers, I
games.
games. I hope managers, and I'm one of them.
Yeah.
But maybe teaching tutors perhaps could go away, and I think it's
Okay.
all starting to bubble. And now I'm wondering, if it acts like a wave and it suddenly happens, which that's entirely possible. In about 1 to 2 years, we find ourselves with I'm already advising 5 startups doing AI. One for
Yeah.
sales, right? So as you're doing your sales pipeline, when to write the email and what email to write. Okay, well now you don't need as many salespeople, and so I think that the exciting thing in tech right now is to build startups around this, and tech doesn't seem to always, and I'm definitely guilty of this, to see the other side of it. And
Yeah.
so they just go for that gold, right? And the effect could be a lot of lost jobs very quickly, and people scrambling. And I'm curious to explore the idea of, well, if that's going to happen, there's going to be a large safety net needed. And
Yeah.
are, in your experience, are nonprofits already operating on the edge? Is there a lot of room to accept a sudden, say in the next 1 to 2 years, a lot of jobs are lost? Where's the support going to come from?
Yeah. And it's funny. I wrote a book on futures of tech,
Uh-huh.
and one of them would be essentially how would some of these menial tasks be displaced with, an AI or some sort of intelligent system. When it comes to non-for-profits, I mean, I guess there's different veins, right? You
Yeah.
have the foundations where, rich people put their money in and they barely do something. But then you have actually community engagements where they
Right.
actually go in front of the community and they work within the community. So I don't think necessarily those jobs will be displaced
Uh
too
huh.
much. I think maybe more the operations would be transformed digitally. Instead of maybe a mom and pop office, there'll be like a call center and they send out people that are actively engaging with people or something. Or when it comes to interaction with uh, officials, getting information from the governments, understanding the grant process. Hopefully, things will be a little bit more streamlined, especially when it comes to inducting policies and getting the funding that they need. And then from the funding announcement to the funding awardance, that gap getting close exponentially. That's the hope, right? That
Uh,
we do that because right now, yeah, they'll announce something in a year and a half, and they won't get it until 2080.
oh, great. Okay, so there's a long lead time too of
Exactly.
getting dollars from one place to another.
Exactly. It took a lot of time for them dollars to walk over there, you know.
Right, right. I wonder if that may be a whole area that needs to be shortened if and when this train starts to roll, out of control.
Hmm.
Hmm. Yeah, this is crazy wild stuff. One of the topics we're just constantly exploring is are we in a revolution, and what does that look like, and what's on the other end? And I think the challenge we don't know what's on the other end, and we're trying to guess a little bit about put some bounds on it. Can we put some bounds on where we may be in 2 to 4 and maybe 10 years and 20 years? And I think, of course, the uncertainty explodes wildly as we go further out. But I think it gets a little more bounded as we look just 1 to 2 years. At least I'm hoping so. But I think if we don't start to prepare right now, we're gonna find ourselves as a society kind of falling flat on our faces when everybody's losing their jobs at once and there's no safety net to receive it or no creativity on the other side for those jobs to go.
Yeah, it's a lot of things that's definitely going to be at scale, right? So transportation is definitely one of them
Yeah,
because, well, hopefully we have smarter roads, right, where you don't go down the street and it's like nothing there. But smarter automation when it comes to roads. A big company, Yellow, just got defunct, so they filed for bankruptcy, and now all of those people are
what did they do?
out of work.
What kind of company were they?
Logistics company.
And why'd they file? Or
Um,
is AI beating them up, or is something else happening?
no, no, it's not. That's the crazy part. I think it's just like poor
Okay,
practices. But we could kind of even translate a similar thing to how, these more intelligent vehicles will start to come out and how there'll be an influx of people that will be without jobs
right. The
because,
truck drivers.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, the truck drivers. Because I mean, truck driving, I have many relatives in truck driving, and then it's a complex sport, but it can definitely be automated.
Hmm.
Of course, as much as they don't want it to.
Especially probably
Um,
the long haul. At least that's my understanding. Is like, yeah, there's the complexities of the final mile, but if you can take it to a hub and then have the thing go down I-10 for 24 hours, that's easier.
exactly,
Are you? Yeah.
Well,
exactly.
if you can solve that logistical problem, then rail starts to become an attractive alternative as well because of lower cost per mile for rail versus truck.
Hmm.
One flip side of all that, though, is that if the job losses are the result of greatly increased productivity, then part of a wave of job losses would be a wave of wealth, which could produce some revolutionary tinder, but could also, presumably through a resurgence in charitable activity, create an entirely new fundamental kind of economy based around figuring out what to do with ourselves now that we're not directly economically useful, but still part of a society that is supporting this fabulously productive economy.
That's the
Yeah.
Star Trek end, right?
The Star Trek is one of the more tech attractive versions, and I think the policy wonk version is something like automated clean communism,
Uh,
but tech feudalism also exists in that particular realm, um, as well as various dystopic novels of the 20th century, um, like, oh, not 1984, the other one. The name is currently escaping me, but Aldous Huxley, The Brave New World. Brave New World, that's it.
mhm. What we're talking about, truckers going that job getting automated potentially soon too. I think I've seen a couple of companies getting close to that. Is there? I'm curious. One of the areas I really hope happens, and this was starting to happen under the Obama administration, is coal was starting to be is and still continues to decline, and the idea was, well, let's take these coal miners and retrain them, get them to become something, whatever that's going to be. And I would love to see more of that kind of organization out there for the truckers going away. But maybe to Noah's point, if the productivity increases, and we saw this with the Industrial Revolution. Yes, those initial jobs go away. Productivity increases. There's suddenly tons more shipping because it's way cheaper, and now you need far more people on the ground repairing wheels and other things that AI doesn't have. So, someone's got to replace those tires. Someone's got to put oil in the truck as it goes down. And so I'm wondering if we need to just work really hard on pulling up all sorts of organizations, nonprofits, everything, just to identify the new jobs that are needed, identify the jobs that are going away, and link those two and get people onto the next thing.
That's a good idea. I actually like that idea. Like organizations built on either, like you say, retraining, repurposing the manpower, the workforce to essentially just still being able to contribute and
Mm-hmm.
provide for their family, but taking those skills and placing them elsewhere. I wonder what happened back in the day when
Right.
electric signals replaced traffic
Uh-oh.
signalers.
Or more recently,
It's
computers, or the internet, um, replacing all sorts of jobs.
everything.
Yeah, everything. I remember seeing.
Every,
I saw typesetters got replaced at the New York Times in the or mid '70s, I think, as they started moving to computers, and so there was a whole job lost, a whole entire
can
area of it.
can you Can you imagine what they called them back in the day? Not stenographers, but just like typewriters back in the day
Yeah,
being, and they seeing Chat GPT. Can you imagine?
yeah, yeah. Whole job gone.
Well,
Dictators, right? Or
yeah,
the
the
Oh, go ahead.
typing pool was a watchword. A point I like to make is the Sears Tower. I don't remember what it's called anymore, but
Sears
um,
Tower.
Is it still
that
called it?
yeah.
Okay.
Well,
No, it's called the
the
Willis Tower, but
Okay.
Willis
we call it
Willis,
Sears
that's it.
Tower.
Yes, the Sears Tower was a computer chip. It's just that all the transistors were human beings, and so Sears was Amazon a century ago,
Yeah.
but they didn't have computers to do all the accounting and tracking and adding and multiplying that was necessary.
I
So
assume
they
the
built
Sears
a
Tower must have had their own operators for the phones.
uh, it, I
Hmm.
I had one trip to Chicago. I had one trip inside the Sears Tower, and I got a little pamphlet that I read for a few months after before it finally got lost. And the stats on the Sears Tower are mind blowing.
And now the
It's
equivalent of an Apple Watch or something, or less.
yeah, 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 yeah. Anyone listening to this is within a few feet of computational power vastly greater than that being carried out by the bureaucracy that was housed within that building.
Wow, wow. And somehow, we survived. I guess the worry with AI is that that won't happen again. That somehow, yes, we're replacing a lot of jobs, but on the other side, a whole bunch of new jobs were made. So people to make the chips, people to manufacture the chemicals to make the chips, people to distribute the chips, and all this stuff. But we've done this a lot of times. I guess the question would be: is AI that final holy crap moment where a lot of human abilities are no longer needed at such a large rate that we can't replace them?
Well, I continue to contend that the entire concept of economics is about human interests, wants, and abilities. And so the the current conception of existing economic winners and losers as the purpose of the economy is the thing that is short-sighted,
Mm-hmm.
and that the adoption of attitudes more like mine are what's going to be necessary to survive the transition to the demonstrable counterproductivity of people writing large, mellifluous grant requests for a shrinking pool of available grant funding, or doing other BS-ish sales activities, which we now have computers that can do that at a far
Yep.
greater rate and a far greater specificity than we could conceivably, afford ourselves. And so I think charity is very much a needed component of a functioning post-industrial true computational society. Uh, I don't know what percentage. It seems difficult to credit that a society could be more than half charity, but that
Hmm.
might be the case.
Yeah.
But in any event, figuring out how to align human actions and interests to build up and help the least and hardest struggling among us is something that has been paying dividends for millennia. And we can even observe some pack animals doing to great success. And so I'd imagine that something that has succeeded not merely among people, but across the animal kingdom, probably has a bit of a future.
Nice,
Interesting.
nice.
We should. I'm curious to double dig down a little bit more into what this world would look like. You were mentioning the. How did you phrase it? It was a good communism.
So yeah, I think I'm not going to get this phrase right. It's something like fully automated communism or something like that. Is the notion that Marx's proposition is that the worker should own the means of production, but if human beings aren't actually productive because computers are productive and humans are basically waste byproducts, then ownership of the means of production is entirely meaningless, and we can simply engineer some kind of system that feeds into our wants. Um, this essentially requires the internalization of the fundamental fantasy of Marx that we can actually objectively measure value,
Hmm.
which is one of the things that Hume more or less put paid to in his, demonstration of the logical impossibility of deriving oughts from ises. Uh, the thing that to me is fascinating about computers is that it becomes possible to quantify ethical considerations, and while we cannot derive ethics, we can write them into our systems. And there are a number of things fumbling towards that. There's the filters on ChatGPT and so on,
Mm-hmm.
where we're getting whatever the ethics
A
of
blunt ethic
those guys
hammer.
are.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I have no idea what their ethics look like
Yeah.
actually, but something, presumably.
Well, we've seen that they've measured it as libertarian liberal, right?
Yeah, yeah. That's certainly the public face, but within the ephemera, who knows where the kinks lie, and they're not alone there. I mean, we've seen other things. The movement towards smart contracts is the notion that you can use computer code as a legal execution mechanism, combining basically the most fraught area of human innovation, law, with the
Mm-hmm.
least understood area of human innovation, programming. So that's obviously very utopian in its view, but still working towards this basic recognition. Um, and yeah, I think we've had a previous one where we were talking about the fact that religions haven't really gotten on board with AI yet, um, although there are some short stories
Huh. Around
that,
around religion accepting this, or
well, I'm thinking specifically, there's an Isaac Asimov short story called The Final Question, in which humanity starts building super AIs and decides to ask it whether or not God exists, and the and it basically says, need more resources, ask again later. And so they keep plugging more and 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 more stuff into it. And they finally, at sort of like the heat death of the universe, every single aspect of the entire universe is plugged into this AI, and the only thing left of it is the question of, is there a God? And it says, "Let there be light," and
It is the God.
it is God,
It
and
is
it
God.
creates a
Oh,
universe.
great. Okay.
Interesting.
Something to look forward to, I think, as long as, again, the.
Well, not something that any of us are likely to get to experience because this is a billion plus year
Uh,
project.
yeah.
Another alternative would be the 9 billion names of God. Dang it, I'm having a bad name day today, but the guy who did Childhood's End and 2001.
I, Arthur C. Clarke, I cheated.
Arthur C.
Yeah.
Clarke, yes. So Arthur C. Clarke has a short story called "The 9 Billion Names of God" about a Tibetan sect that is that has this rule based thing for working out and declaring the names of God, and their religious belief is that once all 9 billion names of God have been expressed, then the universe will come to an end and all of existence will ascend to nirvana. And so they're very interested in this. And so a computer salesman has a bunch of these weird monks show up and ask some bizarre questions and finally pick up a home computer. And he's like telling his wife about this weird sale that he's made over the course of the last few weeks, and looks out of his window, and like the night sky is turning off because their beliefs were correct, and with the use of a computer, it can zip through the 9 billion names in no time at all.
When was this book written?
Wow.
Yeah.
This is a short story,
Okay.
and the 9 billion names of God, I think, is probably like 50s, 60s.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Computers are still
That's
more mythical.
really interesting. Very nice. I got to read that.
I wanted to ask William a little bit about. So you wrote a book, Future of Tech, and I just was curious. I've not had a chance to sit down and look at it except little bits. Uh, without ruining too many surprises, are there what big conclusions did you come to?
Yeah. So, well, I appreciate you looking into that. I'm not the best when it comes to marketing.
We are
That I
not
did
either.
that, but
I, I'm an engineer. I can't market to save my life.
yeah. So, essentially, it's read in a way like you would like in a conversation. I didn't want it like a short novel or anything. But it's read in a way where it helps, someone who's like college level, at least high school
Mhm.
level, at least understand, what's going on. So I
Awesome.
start with AI and I go into smart cities, smart factories, and kind of go into other different nuances. I will spoil one thing. All of them that are projects that are going to happen or is happening, and with the ebook style, you can just click on it and
Oh,
just go straight to the
that's
project.
cool.
And in the back, I have references too. But there's one I really talk about a lot is like some of the forward thinking, almost science fiction like topics. Like I know you mentioned a lot about like the concept of God and stuff. We got like the Church of Google,
Yeah.
and then there was another one about transhumanism, which is like
Hmm.
going that next level of planetary capabilities, and I mean, all of course, right? Like this is all stuff that may or may not happen, but it's some pretty interesting stuff that people really, it's not a conversation that just comes up. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
this is going on.
Interesting. So introducing that concept for a broad audience.
Absolutely.
Interesting. Have you seen any impact from this? Have you talked to people who've read it?
Very insightful. A lot of my close friends and family They've read it and they were kind of amazed how in depth, for the most part, it gets. And I've asked others to kind of critique it and stuff, and they said they want more. Like I kind of leave it on like a cliff note, but I wrote it in a time where I kind of just wanted to get it out
Yeah.
and kind of get my thought processes out and have that conversation. It was more or less like a conversation piece, like, hey, this is happening. What are we going to do about it? Are we going to get on board? Are we going to let it pass us? So most of the conversations are like, yeah, this is good. Let's talk more about it.
Okay. Yeah, I noticed you talked a little bit about AGI, and then you talked a little bit about I think you called it ASI or something. Would be artificial
Yeah,
super intelligence, and that's an area that Noah and I have been wanting to explore more about. Did you go deep into it?
not too deep. It was just more or less like a what the heck it is,
Uh-huh.
right? And could potentially, especially with different nuances and capabilities. I mean, of course, we're nowhere near that now, but
Well,
the amount that
Well,
it would
that
take, yeah.
that is where I would contend not AGI but ASI. I would contend that not only do we have artificial superintelligence, but we've had artificial superintelligences for centuries, and that they're necessary. That managing our economies is too difficult a task for individual humans to do, not just because we're not actually physiologically smart enough to manage the simultaneous interests of more than a handful of us, which we know that we aren't, but also we're not moral enough. There's nobody that you could trust to run your national economy, even if you had access to somebody who was intelligent enough to run
Hmm.
your national economy. And so having artificial systems that allow human collaborative intelligence to produce super intelligent outcomes, I contend, is necessary. And being able to plug super intelligent artificial systems into those systems to produce even more intelligent systems is, I think, one of the real breaking points for some of these catastrophic and also, I think, eucatastrophic was a neologism by Tolkien to describe a sudden wondrous change. He Gollum accidentally falling into Mount Doom he describes as a eucatastrophe.
huh.
That it was an accident, but it was a good outcome.
That's good.
So yeah, I and we've seen outside of the generative AIs, which are highly impressive. We've seen what I would argue are much more impressive actions happening out of the other AI groups in games, some code writing, in translation, and some other things that are producing outputs that human beings cannot duplicate. We can't play chess as well as machines can.
Yeah. So as far as the ASI version, are you referring that the people in the system itself is the superintelligence in collectiveness, or is it maybe an entity or some type of machine out there that's actually doing it?
So I think what we have so far, what we've had so far, is sort of wisdom of crowds effects, where in situations where we've been able to take advantage of like median finding or statistical averaging or other kinds of things like that of large numbers of human minds, has produced these better than human kinds of outcomes. So it's similar to the Fermi problem, probably the most famous one. Enrico Fermi, at the initial blast at the Trinity site, balled up a couple of pieces of paper and held them above his head on his flattened palm, and let the blast wave wind blow them off his hand, and then measured the distance that they went, and was able to create an estimate for the blast magnitude that was pretty good. It was inside, I believe, 5% of the correct final answer, and he was able to produce it in a few seconds after the blast happened, whereas the accurate measurements took several days to get all the instruments into the machines and then actually run the programs to crunch the numbers. And so the way he was able to do that was by assembling an estimator uh, function that had a large number of variables in it so that the errors in the various estimations would cancel each other out.
Mm.
And so markets and other kinds of things like that operate off of this large opinion input with cancellation, which is certainly unsatisfactory to many of the participants, but for the people that sort of live off the residuals, it's great that you don't have the crazy guy down the street determining how your life is going. Um, so so that is something we again see in some of these game AIs, the so-called stochastic tree search algorithms, where they essentially attempt to forecast what might happen just randomly. And
Mm-hmm.
also, when I was studying nuclear engineering, Monte Carlo techniques for determining radiation. So there's kind of two ways you can do things. You can run the differential equations, which if you have very prescribed geometry, that's doable. Or you can set up a computer simulation with a billion gamma rays and run them through the geometry and kind of, roll some dice and see what happens at each step of the way. And for complicated real world geometries, just trying it out and seeing what it looks like turns out to be a lot better than modeling and cleanly solving the math problem.
Nice, nice.
I thought we'd shift over to, I think one of the other things you mentioned, William, that you're interested in is ethics around AI. Was that part of your book?
I wish I covered, yeah, that's one of the things I wish I covered more about, especially talking with other businesses and clients. Sustainability, ethics, and, you know, a little more of the topics, because that is a huge concern. There's one that's out by Bina Mom. She's a Deloitter, fellow
Mm-hmm.
Deloitter. I used to work at Deloitte, but she wrote a book on AI ethics, and it's pretty darn good. So didn't really expound too much on that. And there's of course books solely specific to that. This one's more or less just a general, hey, this is going on, and I cover some like very 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 small,
Mm-hmm. But what is
maybe
your
a
interest
paragraph.
in ethics? Like, what area of the ethics?
You bring a good point when you mention like being able to have assistance for these displacements of jobs. Because if you think about it, it's going to get worse and worse. Right now, it's like right here, and it's just going to
Mm-hmm.
exponentially get worse throughout the years. And then also like how we train models, how we use models, how companies use models. So there should be some type of ethics portion from how it's made, you know, how it's generated, who's making it. Because if they make it with biases or or
Mm-hmm.
try to make it with less biases as possible, but they make it in a malicious intent way, going to do harm. So, and also you feed it bad data and you don't have the checkpoints in there to um, prevent it from not engaging, and that's another one. Plus, what it does,
Yeah.
it could
Yeah.
just go rampant and say a bunch of stuff. I talk about projects in there. There was one I think it was called from Microsoft Tay.
Uh-huh.
They made it on Twitter, X,
Yeah.
X,
X,
and
formerly known as Twitter.
on Twitter.
Yeah.
It was Twitter
Uh,
when they did it. Yeah.
yeah, they put it on there. And it took about maybe an hour or two before it started saying some racial stuff
Yep. Yep.
and saying some bigot stuff. It was
Yep.
just all over the place. So it just goes to show you like bad data or bad data in, bad data out.
Right. I am
But
very
having
worried about that. I mean, we had this problem even before ChatGPT and before neural nets got good. Just the idea of like, I remember I saw a project the police were trying to put together. No, 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 not the police. It was a city council kind of thing for, and I can't remember which city it was, but the idea was to use some sort of AI to. It was two things: use AI to help predict where crimes will occur, and then use AI to help predict help people understand where to buy a house based on crime. And the problem, of course, was a million problems with those. But I'm worried about exactly that. That the AI may have a nice soft face on it, especially ChatGPT, but it is underlying injecting some really awful stuff into society, and I'm not sure if that's being discussed enough or explored enough.
yeah,
Well,
and let's. Oh, go ahead. Go.
sorry. Well, to connect the point you just made with an earlier point of like what happened when police stopped directing traffic at intersections, one of the big things that happened was a massive drop in the number and style of police officers from a sort of beat community based system that had some very nasty corruption
Biases. Yeah.
potential, but when it wasn't corrupt, worked extremely better than any policing system that we're currently using. So sort of feast or famine basically,
Yeah.
and with the reduction in sort of numbers required and the cost savings that councils were able to run on and so on, moved to our kind of current stat-based policing, which can turn into self-fulfilling prophecies in either direction, where either a community gets a statistical variation, becomes over policed, or the what the numbers say should happen is what should happen, but it isn't politically palatable, and so a region becomes under policed, and like Detroit, essentially, you know, turns itself into a graveyard because it's no longer possible to carry out the basic structure of maintaining a civilization there.
Yeah, it looks like a dystopia over there.
Mm.
At night, oh man, it look crazy. Some parts. Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry, Detroit.
Yeah. 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 So are you? Yeah. This area. I'd love to dive. I mean, we could do a whole discussion on this alone, but
Yeah,
the my I guess my chief worry is that like Noah was saying, that there's the underlying model which will have its biases. Then there's the little bit of pre-prompts, that last little mile, that where there's a massive ethics hammer smashed on this thing.
yeah,
And then also, I don't know in what ways, if you put this if you put this massive sieve around the model and only a portion's allowed to come through, are we seeing some just extremely biased, bizarre version of what's underneath? And then I wanted to add one more thing to it. There's only one ChatGPT 4 model, I think, in which case both Bing Chat and ChatGPT have one perspective, and it's not at all a diverse perspective, even among itself. It's one perspective with some
yeah,
slight variation.
yeah. And to be honest, I kind of, although it's the same perspective, um, being AI, I don't really
Yeah,
don't like as much. I do like using ChatGPT for, especially how I prompt engineer. It's a little bit
yeah,
easier to kind of capture some of those notes. But going back to the first question, those biases and things, it's multiple facets, right? It's like what's making it, who's making it, where it's being made, and who's contributing to the data.
hmm
Let's be honest. Most of ChatGPT's engineers, they're white and
yep,
Asian.
yep,
So their biases, their family
right,
morals, their ways of being taught,
hmm
the
hmm
company's ways of ethics, and the pressures it's getting from the government is all translated into this project.
yep,
So when you have this project, the data that comes in, the data that comes out, it's a reflection of it. Now, the outliers, the things that you really can and can't control is like the people contributing to it. That data is kind of sifting in. I don't know how much they really haven't really spoken to how it's being made, but from what I understand, when I was working on a project, is essentially like piece by piece they implement information and they teach it kind of in a way like humans are taught. So essentially,
Hmm.
like how AI is being reflected is how me and you and Marty and Noah, we were made to be raised good moral values, structural integrity, family base, politeness, in some cases religion, and some of those values and try to keep that in its core solution. And other projects has failed, like Tay and other
Yeah.
projects, XYZ. But for the most part, this is really gaining success, and especially during COVID, and when it first was kind of introduced, it was like a whole brand new scheme. But I think the ethics part is a concern because there's no police. There's no
Hmm.
one to say, "Hey, it's out of line," or how do we how do we reference check, its reasoning? Who's going to understand this? How is going to understand it? Is it going to use tools and solutions to understand it? So it's a whole new market. And just like how you have cybersecurity and you have auditors, you have pen testers, XYZ, you're going to have stuff like that for AI. You're going to have AI regulators.
Right.
You're going to have trust oriented people that's going to make sure it's doing its intended operation.
I remember a very real world example of the biases was I think I asked ChatGPT to make me a dish with beef and potatoes in it, and it gave me a very
Mm.
American dish. It wasn't Indian, it wasn't Chinese, it wasn't from Canada. It was American. And those are the more obvious on the face problems. But yeah, the underlying, the subtle ones that slowly push a bias into and continue to propagate a bias, I guess is what I'm currently very worried about.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, pushing isn't a bad thing to think about either. There's
Hmm.
a former professor of Stanford that is tracking ephemeral Google data. I'm not precisely sure how he's doing this, but basically things like search engine completions and so on. And he claims that by by their decisions about how to do that,
Hmm.
they're actually
There's
creating large scale changes in
they're steering society.
consumer and yes and so on behavior. And what he claims is sort of the trump card to demonstrate that this is the case is that when he is watching and finds one of these influences, they stop doing what they're doing. Uh,
Okay, someone goes and tweaks the code.
right. Yes.
That's pretty scary. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, so think about what sorts of information leakage in both directions could exist with ChatGPT. Um, you've got a young, budding, brilliant student that doesn't fit in well with school and give it ChatGPT as a tutor, and this person starts exploring new ideas and interests and starts thinking in a novel way about technology, say. Uh, who's on the other side of that conversation? Can OpenAI be simultaneously listening to millions of these conversations and seeing new trends in fashion or technology or other things and beat you to the punch on those because they're able to use the unvarnished version of their AI to link up and find new areas of exploration? Um, And if that was a capability of theirs, how would they want to roll out that capability in such a manner that they could maintain it? One of the issues the Allies had in World War II is that they could listen to all of the all of the Axis
yes,
communications, but they didn't want the Axis to
to know
know they
that.
could listen to all the
Right,
Axis communications
right.
because then they might stop communicating that way.
Yeah, yeah.
No, you bring a good. Oh,
Go
go.
ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say you bring up a good point. OpenAI definitely has another. opportunity for or economic is the the unvarnished data, as you mentioned, you know, early insights into how its users are using it, what is it using it for, how it's generating that information, all that sawdust from the product itself is bringing. They could sell that information to potential analytics and insights companies, and then just or academia or in educational firms that are looking to, you know, gain a little bit more in-depth insight about its product and its use cases, kind of pre-planning some of those things so it doesn't have to do all of that hard work. No, it's an interesting thing for sure.
The other area of bias, I'm you were mentioning, William, about policing the models in some sense, and that's an area we've kind of explored. The only problem I've run into is I've not seen much of any good, clear way of even what that makes, how that makes sense. Like if I buy a microwave in about 5 years, is there going to be a sticker on it that says approved, does not contain any AI? But what does that even mean? Because if it's smart and says, oh, you have a burger, I'm going to put it at 10 seconds
Point.
more versus is it actually a thinking AGI that is going to offer me ideas. One of the real scary examples I thought was you've got a medical situation and the AGI is trying to decide what to do, and the person's 98 and says, well, we shouldn't use resources on 98-year-old. Now it's used some sort of interesting ethics to do a very consequential change that we may have not chosen. And so I don't even know if we have any kind of structure. I'm trying to think of any other flavor of this that exists in all of humanity where we have to police some level of intelligence and quantify it. And I've come up completely dry so far. But it'd be an interesting topic for a discussion about how you may even do that.
So we would essentially like you said that the granny and the AGI perspective, the care part of it, or the
Well,
knowing the difference between what's good and what's right.
I think there's a lot of ethics questions to answer about what is right, how we even perceive what is right, but also how do we even perceive that this thing is at the level of what we would call AGI if and when that comes. And because there's been some discussion about, there was an idea put forth about let's take a 6-month moratorium on AI research or something. And first of all, I thought it was complete baloney because we've never been able to agree as a global population on Earth about even the smallest things. I think the only thing we ever agreed on was maybe the Geneva Convention and maybe a few others. But if we stop, the Chinese are not going to stop. The Russians are not going to stop. Then we're going to be behind, so we need to catch up. But even what does that mean to stop? Does that mean that Reddit cannot work on personalization AI? I mean, that's the problem is this is almost too complex for us to define, I think, as a society. And so I've not seen a lot of good definitions. I've seen, let's all agree to do something, but beyond that, it's too vague to be executable. But we're out of time. I would love to keep going down this road. This is the area that gets me really excited. So where can we find more of your stuff, William? What's your book again?
Yeah, so the book is called Future Tech. It is on Amazon and Apple Books. You can also purchase it on the website. Sorry, the website is futuretech.ai.
Awesome.
Futuretech. And you could definitely tune in to me. I talk about tech and different little things. You can check more on me at WSC Tech, TECH.co. And we kind of cover more things on that. So
awesome. And as always, you can continue to find the Fourth Age on, what are we on? We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. I think I'm going to try to get us on YouTube before long. Thank you, William.
definitely YouTube. Thank you, guys. I
Great
appreciate you.
chatting.